Hello everyone. As most of you know, there was a rumor going around about the idea of Ron Paul. Supposedly he was supposed to make a special announcement last night on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. This rumor started on the Daily Paul website, where a random individual that not many people knew very much about said that Ron Paul would be making this special announcement. It then evolved into a rumor of a third-party run through speculation, curiosity, and discussion. And then he finally evolved even further with a supposed conference call that almost, from what I understand, there were about 300 people or a couple hundred people on the call, but it hasn't even been made public. Like, nobody recorded it, nobody released it. But even if it was, and maybe there are links to it, and you can send them to me if I'm wrong, but even if there was, we don't even know who this guy is. He claims to be a Ron Paul delegate, he claims to be very close to the campaign, and he has claimed that he spoke personally with Dr. Paul. And the conference call basically said that Ron Paul wanted to be the vice presidential candidate for Gary Johnson, and that the Gary Johnson campaign has reached out to Ron Paul asking him to take this position, but Ron Paul wasn't sure if he wanted it or not, because he wanted to make sure that there was enough support out there. And he didn't believe that because of people bashing Rand Paul and bashing Jesse Benton. This story just sounds so crazy to me, but basically the idea was that everybody was supposed to call Ron Paul's congressional office or send an email asking Ron Paul to make this decision to be the VP candidate for the Libertarian Party. Okay, so this became a very big rumor. Everybody was getting very excited, anticipating it. Last night, the show came on, and Ron Paul was asked some of these questions. I don't think the rumor was brought up to him, but he was asked, would you run third party? Are you going to endorse somebody? Ron Paul has basically said, I'm not going to endorse anybody. I'm not sure who I want to vote for yet, and I have no intention of running third party and no interest in that prospect. The moral of the story should be, don't believe everything you hear, especially over the internet, especially from sources that are not credible. Like a good journalist, we have to be good voters. Check your sources. Okay? It's very hot in my room right now, so I'm a little thirsty. But this guy, we don't even really know who he is. We haven't seen his credentials. We haven't heard anything from Ron Paul himself or any credible source inside the campaign. Where did we get this information? But we were willing to jump on it because it just sounded so good. What's the old saying? If it's too good to be true, it just might be. I'm not going to mention all the reasons that Ron Paul wouldn't and probably realistically couldn't be the VP pick now that the VP nominee has already been chosen. I think that Jim Gray is a good choice. I think you should give him a chance and look at his credentials. But that being besides the point, you can't believe everything you hear. So I would just ask that in the future you be more careful, because there are wolves in sheep's clothing. Now, I'm not making any accusations, and I'm not saying this is the case, but I have to wonder if people are not trying to create division right before a major election, trying to confuse and distract people, basically the divide and conquer technique. This would certainly pin longtime libertarians like myself and diehard Ron Paul supporters against one another. This would cause a lot of arguments and fights, and worst of all, it gets people's hopes up, dashes them to pieces when it doesn't happen, and people become apathetic. I mean, it's psyops at its finest, if that's what's going on. Not saying it is. I'm just saying It's a possibility, and you need to watch out for people like this. Because there are people, I believe, that would be willing to spread cruel rumors, and perhaps there is somebody trying to test just how gullible we are. Let's not feed the trolls. That being said, many others expected Ron Paul to endorse Gary Johnson. I have a couple theories about why he won't do that. The number one theory, the obvious one that everyone goes to, is Rand Paul. He doesn't want to hurt his son by being that crazy dad whose shadow he has to escape from under. And maybe retreating from politics for a while would help him solve that problem. I think it's a plausible explanation, but there are other ideas as well. An interview was done with Doug Weed, I'm sure most of you saw it, that Mitt Romney, the reason that Ron Paul did not attack Mitt Romney during the primary, because Mitt Romney promised a massive PR campaign that would ruin the legacy and reputation of Ron Paul forever, essentially undoing all the work that he did, the movement that he built. I think it's a credible threat. Mitt Romney certainly has the money to do something like that. We certainly have enough ignorant voters who won't do their research to see if it's a lie or not. So it wouldn't be hard for him to do. And if you look at what happened during the primary election, every time a candidate caught up with Mitt Romney, something happened. You know, they ran out of money, or they didn't poll as high as they thought they were going to, or they dropped out inexplicably. The most curious case I found was the case of Herman Cain. Herman Cain was catching up to Mitt Romney in the polls. He was doing very well with his fundraising. He was getting a lot of people very excited. Now, I'm not saying I like Herman Cain or I agree with Herman Cain on his politics, but I thought it was so interesting that as soon as he started becoming a credible threat to Mitt Romney, and you can look this up, look up the dates of when this happened, what the polling data was like. As soon as he starts giving Mitt Romney a run for his money, all these women come out of virtually nowhere to accuse him of sexual harassment. I'm not sure if the allegations were true, but I am saying the evidence was very weak. The witnesses were not that credible. But the fact that there were so many of them, and the fact that most voters are so gullible, proved absolutely detrimental to Herman Cain in this respect. And he was forced to drop out of the race. You know, and I just asked myself, why wasn't that an issue before he started becoming a threat to Mitt Romney? I mean, wouldn't these women come out as soon as they saw him in the first debate, saying, I don't want this guy to be president after what he did to me? You know what I mean? Why did they wait until he started catching up to Mitt Romney in the polls? You think that... Now, I'm not saying Mitt Romney did this. Maybe the Republican Party did this. Because they seem to have picked Mitt Romney from the very beginning, despite how much most people in the Republican Party didn't even like him. But he was their chosen one. You know, it's just... And I try not to be a conspiracy theorist too often, but I do like to sort of use my noggin once in a while. So what I have to wonder is, since Mitt Romney is certainly capable of this kind of slander and very capable of destroying somebody's reputation, is it possible that maybe the threat still stands? If Ron Paul endorses anybody else, he's, you know? It's a thought. But I believe the most credible explanation is the fact that Ron Paul wants you to think for yourself. This was an intellectual revolution. This was a movement of ideas, and this was a movement of liberty, where we give people choices, where we appeal to people's sense of freedom. And yet it has devolved into a movement of sensationalism and emotionalism, and worst of all, has become a personality cult. Anybody who tries to leave the cult is a traitor, or weak, or a part of the establishment all along. I just don't think the development of a personality cult of this measure is becoming of the liberty movement. I don't think it says much about us. Ron Paul's exact statements are basically that he will not endorse a political candidate. The only thing he wants to endorse is the ideas of his movement, the ideas of liberty, the ideas of freedom. He doesn't want to get into the political games of endorsing individuals and telling his supporters, go there, and we go. Do this, and we do it. Ron Paul never wanted to become the dictator of the liberty movement. The Alexander the Great, who could command his troops to walk off a cliff and they would do it. That's never what Ron Paul intended. And you wonder why they call us Paulbots when we engage in this. On the other hand, Ron Paul has silently and evasively said some things. When asked by a correspondent for John Stossel what he thought about Gary Johnson, if he would endorse him, Ron Paul's exact words were, "I think he's wonderful." I don't think Ron Paul would say that about an establishment candidate. You didn't hear him saying that about Mitt Romney. You didn't hear him saying that about Barack Obama. He said, "I think he's wonderful, and everyone should look into him. But," he added, "they should make their own decision. Not blindly make their decision like robots because I said so, but make their own adult, educated decision." On the Jay Leno show last night, he said something very interesting. When asked about a third-party run, he explained that the reason he didn't do that was because the system was rigged with the two-party system, so on and so forth. We've heard the rhetoric over and over again, how the third parties can't win, and that Ron Paul ran Republican because he knew that and he needed the press time to spread his message. But he added something really interesting, and I think he was being very cryptic here when he said it. He said, "But you know, the two parties are basically the same." So what happens, he asked, when the people realize that the parties are the same, finally, and they realize there's another choice? What happens then? He asked. What is the other choice? Obviously, it's a third party. In another interview, he said that the Republican Party was not his party, and that both of the parties were Keynesians. And he was correct in that observation. While he may not have endorsed Gary Johnson directly, he is clearly pointing us in the direction that we need to go. Connect the dots. I believe sincerely that Ron Paul, if he could, or if he felt that it was necessary, that it was right for this kind of movement, that he would endorse Gary Johnson. I know for a fact, beyond a shadow of a doubt, he would approve of a vote for Gary Johnson. And all I ask is the same thing that Ron Paul asks you. Look into him. Give the man a chance. Just because his name isn't Ron Paul does not mean he is not on our side. That's all I ask.